Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto was a hollow. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. There was one group of Shinigami sent to protect Karakura town during its time of need. In order to fight the Car that would inevitably be sent there by Aizen, they were the most specialized group of anti-Car Shinigami in Seoul society. Supposedly. What actually happened was Abarai Renji and Kuchiki Rukia simply picking people they knew and were close to, creating a hilarious mishmash of personalities and fighting abilities. In addition to Abarai Renji and Kuchiki Rukia, there were 5 other Shinigami present to bring the total up to 7. Madarei Mikaku and Ayasegawa Yumachika of the 11th Division, 10th Division Vice Captain Matsumoto Ranjaku, 8th Division 3rd Seat Nara Shikamaru, and the newly promoted 5th Division Vice Captain Hatake Kakashi. All of these Shinigami were being led by the 10th Division's captain, Hitsugaya Tushiru. After a particularly stupid incident where all of these strange Shinigami showed up masquerading as normal high school students, they needed a place to stay afterwards. All 7 of them were scattered around a general area, staying with humans that they had managed to hook up a stay with. While they waited for a signal, they simply went along with their daily lives. They ate, they helped out with chores for their hosts, but some of them simply sat on the roof, contemplating the upcoming war and the Car that they'd be fighting against. While Matsumoto ate, Ikaku contemplated an onigiri, Hitsugaya sat on a roof, and Kakashi, Shikamaru, and Renji did chores for the Urahara shop. A number of strong Ryatsus radiated throughout the town. Ichigo's eyes widened as he felt the familiar type of Ryatsu. Rukia was already on her spirit phone, trying to receive the coordinates of all the signatures, but to no avail. It's them, he thought, thinking back to when he fought those 2 Car the other day. The fight had left a nasty imprint on his behavior, seeing as how he had almost lost control to the thing inside him back then. 2, no 7. There's so many of them, the female Shinigami shouted. Are they headed our way? Ichigo asked frantically. All throughout the town, the assigned Shinigami all shed their jigai to emerge into their real forms. Hitsugaya was the quickest to react, shedding his jigai in a few seconds flat. Matsumoto emerged on the rooftop a few seconds later. Where is Inu? Asked the young captain. She's tired, so she shouldn't interfere with the fight at this rate. I left my jigai there with here though. No, it looks like they're going somewhere, but they aren't headed our way. Rukia paused for a moment, as she noticed a pattern on her phone. They're spreading out in all directions, like they're going for anyone with even the slightest amount of Ryatsu. No matter how small it is, these Car are going to kill them, she finished. Ichigo shed his human body quickly, coming out in his Shinigami form and grabbing the hilt of his Zanpakuto. Ishida should have no spirit power right now, but what about Chad and Inu? Inu has Hitsugaya Taishu and Matsumoto Fuku Taishu backing her up. About Chad though, one's heading for him right now. And he doesn't have anyone protecting him. Rukia shouted. Ichigo's eyes widened, and he shot out into the night. Hitsugaya and Matsumoto both stood at the ready within their true Shinigami bodies, the younger of the 2 holding the hilt of his Zanpakuto similarly to Ichigo. A flash, and then there were 2 Car standing in midair directly above Inu Oriheim's rooftop. One was a stout, fat Car with a black bowl cut, and a mask covering the complete right half of his face. The other was a taller, skinnier Car with a more angular face and braided black hair. His mask covered the upper left portion of his face, with a long spike sticking out of the top of his head to the right. Their names were Shalong Kufang and Nakim Green Dina, 2 Frachen underneath Grimjow's control. Good evening, remarked Shalong politely, before the Frachen used Sonido to get the jump on Hitsugaya. I am the Undecimo Car, Shalong. He greeted, as Hitsugaya blocked his blade. I am the 10th Division Captain, Hitsugaya Tushiru. He retorted. The 2 broke the contact their blades had made, and stood at a distance between each other. They stared each other down for a good period of time, before they both charged up their Ryatsu. With Hitsugaya's power limited at 20%, It could be a difficult fight. Up in the sky, Naruto watched Shalong and Nakim establish contact with the enemy. He narrowed his eyes as Shalong clashed swords with a captain of all things. He looked at Grimjow before he said something to the fellow Espada. Go fight whoever the hell you want. But don't do anything stupid. You can introduce yourself, but don't tell anything about the Espada or the fact that I'm planning something. We need things to remain under wraps for the time being. Naruto remarked. Grimjow looked at him oddly. Whatever. I don't care about that, anyway, he said. Good, I'll leave them to you then. I've got something to take care of, so I won't be able to join the fight just yet. No one here should be a match for you anyway. Naruto said. Before Grimjow could respond to him, Naruto had flashed away. With one simple burst of Sonido, he landed on Ina's balcony and concealed his presence, in a safe place where he could watch Hitsugaya's and Shalong's battle. Meanwhile, Chad rushed through the lower part of town, eager to join in battle and help out. His breath caught in his throat as a hand shot out and almost impaled him straight through the heart. It would have too, if another hand didn't grab it before it could do any damage. My, oh my. That was a little dangerous there, don't you think? Asked a smooth male voice as he gripped the attacking Arrancar's hand tightly, preventing him from pulling it back. A masked Shinigami stood in front of Chad, putting himself between the human and the Arrancar. Chad's eyes widened and he clutched the area over his heart where blood began to leak. Chad, why don't you let us handle this? Came a lazy voice standing on the fence nearby them. Chad looked up to see a Shinigami with a pineapple hairstyle crouched on the fence, his bored expression at odds with the events that were happening. Chad let his emotionally heightened state relax into his normal, calm one, and he nodded thoughtfully. Oh, I get it. I'll just leave it to you, then, he said, after a little bit of suppressed protesting. The large teenager ran away at a brisk pace, not even pausing as Rukia and Ichigo called out to him. Kakashi, Shikamaru-san. Ichigo called out, as he and Rukia ran up to them. He witnessed the Arrancar with the strange mask and the bandage over his right eye, and he grasped the hilt of his Zanpakuto. Save it, Kurosaki. Let Kakashi handle this one, he hasn't had any serious action in quite some time. It'll be fine, Kakashi won't lose, said Shikamaru, as he fiddled with his own Zanpakuto while Kakashi drew his. It was a normal katana, with a gray hilt and a pretty standard guard. Despite that, Kakashi wielded it with absolute ease. The Arrancar he was facing grinned deviously, giving him a crooked smile. The Arrancar rushed forward, and Kakashi blocked his attack with his Zanpakuto. The vice captain slashed vertically, catching the Arrancar's hand which managed to block it with the arrow. I'm Arrancar Diocesius, Deroy. He introduced. Kakashi was about to introduce himself at the 5th Division's vice captain, but Deroy cut him off before he could finish. Yeah, save it. If I learned the name of everyone I was going to kill, then I'd never be able to remember any of them. Kakashi glared at the 16th Arrancar, though he didn't say a single word to his adversary. Kakashi's sword and Deroy's arm continued to push for dominance in their stalemate, but Kakashi began to push even harder. Deroy gasped as the Zanpakuto broke through his arrow. Blood began to spurt from the wound he was receiving, before the sword sliced clean through the arm, severing it and creating little more than a stump. The arm flopped bloodily on the ground, while Deroy screamed in pain and clutched his bleeding stump with his remaining arm. Kakashi withdrew his blade and readied himself for another attack. One Shuinpa later, and Deroy was outmatched. Kakashi's speed was far too much for the deformed Arrancar, and he was speared on the end of Kakashi's sword before he could even recover from the last injury he had gotten. Damn you! Deroy choked out as Kakashi pulled his blade out of the Arrancar's body, a fountain of blood splashing all over the place. Deroy's vision began to get muddy, and he tried to lift his arms so he could grab Kakashi. But to no avail, the wound was far too deep, and the 16th Arrancar collapsed to his knees, trying to stop the blood with his hands. One moment later, and Deroy was dissolving into dust. It's such a shame that you didn't allow me to finish my introduction. Kakashi said coolly, as he sheathed his Zanpakuto. Shikamaru yawned up on the wall, while Ichigo and Rukia looked at Kakashi in awe. "He's as strong as ever," Rukia remarked. Ichigo nodded right beside her. Kakashi sighed and adjusted his mask a little, before he turned to face his three compatriots. "Kurosaki-san, Kuchiki-san, Shikamaru, are you?" He was cut off as a horribly strong Ryatsu fell over the area. Kakashi turned around frantically, his eyes wide, while Shikamaru, Rukia, and Ichigo stood rooted in shock, their eyes focused on something ahead. "What's this Ryatsu? I'm gonna have to release the limit if I want to fight this," Kakashi said frantically in his head. "What? I suppose Deroy got beaten after all, huh? Were you guys the ones that did it?" came a rough, raspy voice from over the rooftop a ways away. A black sandal stepped on one of the panes, and Grimmjow stepped off of the roof and into the light in front of the four Shinigami. They stood there petrified, unable to comprehend that the Arrancar in front of him was the same species as the one before. "I'm Arrancar Siete. Grimmjow. Nice to meet ya, Shinigami," he hissed. "So, it looks like Deroy got fucking killed, huh? Never was much of a good fighter anyway, so whatever," Naruto remarked as he lounged on the balcony. So far he had been watching Shalong and Nikim's fights intently. They were doing pretty well thus far, though granted the limiters were probably on right now anyway. His eyes widened again. "So, they got Edrad too? Fucking useless piece of shit," he cursed under his breath. It looked like Yilfort had released for some reason, but he wasn't too interested in that fight. He could everything they were saying up there, and it looked like Nikim and Shalong had the upper hand currently, even after Hitsugaya went into Bankai. "Oh my god, this kid sucks," Naruto remarked, watching the young captain sever his icy Bankai tail in an attempt to kill Shalong. Not to mention, the flower petals that made up the timer for his Bankai were dwindling down. Even at only 20% power, it was pathetic. Even with your abysmal combat abilities, it would just be too rude to fight a captain without my strongest battle capabilities. That's why, before your Bankai disappears, I will exterminate you with them. Shalong held his sword in front of him, and placed his fingers on the guard as if he was going to scratch it. He spread his palms out after that as his sword began to glow with yellow Ryatsu. "Snip, Tijerita," he shouted, as he was engulfed in a pillar of his own Ryatsu. When the Ryatsu cloud dispersed, Shalong was standing there in his full resurrection. His caged mask covered the left half of his face, and his hollow mask armor covered much of his torso and all of his arms. An insect-like tail emerged from his backside, and his hands became deadly-looking pincer blades that could slice through an enemy with ease. Shalong smirked, as before Hitsugaya could even react, he was gored through on Shalong's pincers, which left 5 deep slashes alongside the captain's body. He gurgled up blood and coughed it, and Shalong introduced his full name. "Undecimo Arrancar, Shalong Tsufang. It's been a pleasure knowing you, little Captain San," he said, as he sliced off a part of Hitsugaya's wings with his claws. Hitsugaya stared down at his wounds in shock, trying to comprehend how this Arrancar was able to wound him so much. He was about to plummet to earth, but he held his ground, planting his levitating feet in midair and panting, still prepared for battle. "Amazing, you still stand in front of me even after being confronted with my strength. As expected of a captain. It's admirable, really," Shalong commented. Hitsugaya only scoffed at him. "Shalong Tsufang. I want to ask you something. You said that you were the undecimo Arrancar, so in other words, you're the 11th one. That means you're the 11th best in terms of combat ability, right?" Shalong looked contemplative. "No. The numbers we are given do not reflect our strength, but rather the order in which we were born. However," Shalong trailed off, and Hitsugaya looked quizzical. "That only applies to Arrancar numbered 11th and below." Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he narrowed his eyes at Shalong from below on the balcony. "Shall I explain?" First, using the Hogyoku, we were transformed from hollows into Aaronkar, which consolidates our birth. Even though there are many hollow that have Aaronkarized, without the Hogyoku, we are given a number starting from 11 and going downwards. The Aaronkar with particularly strong combat abilities and plucked out and given a number from 1 to 10, from strongest to weakest. Fuck, you're saying too much now. Naruto seethed, as he gripped the rail of the balcony. After a split-second decision, he released himself from the rail and stood rigid. He thrust his hand out in front of him, which charged with a display of orange. Bala Siguiendo, he muttered, as he launched a bullet of orange off into the night. It flew straight for a moment before it curved towards its intended target. Those chosen, 10, are called the Espada. They have their particular numbers tattooed somewhere on their bodies as proof. They are also given authority over all Aaronkar ranked 11 and below. He trailed off, as a lazy smirk entered his face. And let me make this perfectly clear. Compared to Aaronkar like us, the strength of the Espada is in a whole other dimension. Hitsugaya's eyes widened in shock. I'll say one last thing. Among this group of Aaronkar that entered the real world, he was cut off and his orange bala slammed into the side of his head. He yelled as the energy seared into his skin, before the bala burst into an uncharacteristic surge of power. When the energy had cleared, Shalong's head was missing. The headless Aaronkar then fell to the ground dead, his speech to Hitsugaya forever remaining unfinished. Fucking dumbass. I was too late, he already said too damn much, Naruto remarked, his Ryatsu still finished. He sighed in anger in order to prevent lashing out, before he disappeared in Sonido back to the spot where the Garganta had opened. Looks like Grimmjow's about to fight. I'll have to tell him the newest development, I'm sure he won't mind being down one more fraction. If the remaining two can't pull out a victory, he'll be riding solo from now on. Taicho! Matsumoto shouted, as her captain hung in the air. Hitsugaya shook himself from his daze, remembering that there were still more opponents to be fought. We still haven't heard the signal to lift the limit, yet, he shouted. Matsumoto lay defeated at the ground at the hands of Nikim, who looked about ready to crush her. She was about to shake her head before her communicator buzzed with a sound. A voice was heard on the other side, and Matsumoto communicated with the 12th Division member on the other side. Taicho! Renji! Kakashi! We've been cleared to life, the limit. She shouted into her communicator. It's about damn time. Renji shouted excitedly, as he unbuttoned the hem of his robe to show the 6th Division symbol on the inside. Over on the other side of the battlefield, Kakashi wasn't so excited. Even with the limit released, it might not be enough. Even Shikamaru had witnessed the danger that Grimmjow was, as he had drawn his sword and was readying himself. Kakashi, Renji, and Ranjaku all braced themselves for the limit release. Limit. Release, they shouted. It looks like they released the limit. Oh, well, it looks like Grimmjow isn't going to have any fraction after this. Naruto remarked, feeling the Ryatsu of the new and improved Shinigami. So? Grimmjow asked, as he stared down the 4 Shinigami. The unranked, the substitute, the 3rd seat, and the vice-captain. All of them were staring intently at Grimmjow like they would a wild animal. They needed to attack tentatively. I'm asking which one of you is strongest, he asked, as he panned his eyes through the row of Shinigami. Rukia gasped, before she turned to the other 3. Everyone, this is bad. Get out of here, she shouted. She didn't have any time to react as Grimmjow thrust his fist directly through her chest, punching a hole in it completely. Yeah, I thought it wasn't you. He remarked. He pulled his hand out and let her flop to the ground awkwardly, like nothing had happened. Rukia! Ichigo shouted, as he rushed Grimmjow. Kakashi and Shikamaru stared wide-eyed as they watched their comrade get impaled, only to be brought out of their spell by Ichigo's bold move. Kurosaki, don't, Shikamaru shouted, before Grimmjow flashed into existence before him. With the same tactic, and with speed that Shikamaru couldn't even react to, he was impaled in the exact same way as Rukia. Shikamaru. Damn it! Kakashi cursed, as he took a swipe at Grimmjow. He grunted in surprise as Grimmjow caught the sealed blade in his bare hand, holding it as if it wasn't even sharp. He crushed the sword in his fist, breaking it directly in half, before throwing the blade away. Kakashi recoiled in surprise at the power of the espada, before a kick to the stomach from Grimmjow sent him groggy. Kakashi flew into the wall behind him, and lay there still. Kakashi-san, Shikamaru-san. Ichigo cried. The whole incident lasted no more than 10 seconds, and now Ichigo was the only one left who was battle-ready. Ichigo swung his giant butcher for a shuriken at Grimmjow, who blocked it easily with his elbow. The orange-haired Shinigami attempted to fire off a Getsuga, but it ended up backfiring into his direction instead. Grimmjow held his arm up, looking bored at Ichigo's display. Hey, stop fucking around, Shinigami. I'm going easy on you right now so you can get your Bankai out. If you don't, then I'll rip a hole in you just like I did that Shinigami over there, he shouted with a lunatic grin. Bastard, he roared, before he stared at his fallen comrades, and the enemy in front of him. He didn't have a choice. Bankai! Ichigo shouted, as he was covered with a black and red Ryatsu, his body beginning to accommodate to the change. Is that it? Ichigo didn't respond, choosing instead to stab his black Bankai sword into the ground, creating a crater in the street. Grimmjow hopped out of the way of the strike, readying himself as Ichigo swiped at Grimmjow from down below. The Septima grabbed Tensa Zangetsu in his hand, in the same manner as he did with Kakashi. He then lurched Ichigo and threw him. The orange-haired Shinigami skidded down the street and tried to level himself, but in the end he was a couple blocks away when he had stopped. Grimmjow sonitoed right in front of him, and tried to catch him with a nasty left hook. The Shinigami in turn shunput away and horizontally slashed at Grimmjow. He was thwarted by Iero yet again, and got a kick to the face for his troubles. Grimmjow then kicked the boy downwards, so that Ichigo crashed into the street due to the force. Grimmjow sped down to the street where Ichigo lay, casually kicking him to the curb. While Ichigo was still downed, Grimmjow grabbed his collar and proceeded to punch the living daylights out of Ichigo for at least a few minutes straight. He kicked Ichigo up, and then down again, before spitting into the street from midair. Is that all there is to a Bankai? Grimmjow mused, before a figure flashed into existence right beside him. A shock of blonde hair, covered by fox ear masks, gave the identity away. Wow, that was it. You're done already? Naruto asked, smirking down at the beaten Shinigami in the street. Grimmjow looked to the side at him, before smiling like a lunatic. This kid ain't worth shit, I don't know why Aizen threw a shitfit over him. Grimmjow commented. Getsuga. Tensho. The two Arankar looked down where Ichigo lay in the street, where he had charged up a powerful Ryatsu attack. The red and black wave of Ryuryoku flew toward both Espada. Naruto flashed away on reflex, Grimmjow was unprepared for it. He shielded his arms in front of his face, and in the end he received little more than a few minor injuries. What? Ulquiorra didn't mention anything like that attack, Shinigami. Grimmjow hissed as he grinned down at the young Shinigami. Ichigo was muttering something underneath his breath that neither Naruto nor Grimmjow could pick up on. Am I still disappointing you? Arankar, Ichigo retorted. Naruto reappeared next to Grimmjow in a burst of sonito, and Ichigo took notice of his presence for the first time. Who the hell are you? He asked rudely, angry over the arrival of yet another Arankar. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the injured boy, thinking he was probably an idiot for provoking him when he was already so injured. Grimmjow, why don't you go ahead and finish him off? You've already done most of the work, and this kid is beginning to piss me off. It'll be a reprieve when he's finally dead. Ha! Well, isn't this great, Shinigami? It seems there's finally a reason to kill you. Grimmjow roared. He placed a hand on the hilt of his Zanpakuto, drawing it forward slowly as if to draw out the tension. Don't just stand there spacing out, Shinigami. It's my turn now. His Zanpakuto was almost out of his sheath when another presence flashed itself behind Grimmjow. Naruto's eyes narrowed, having picked up on it the second he had arrived into the real world. That fucker Tosen was here to take them back to Huecomundo. "Sheath your sword, Grimmjow," Tosen said calmly, as he managed to get the jump on Grimmjow. Grimmjow's eyes widened, and he grunted as he felt the familiar presence. "Tosen." He sheathed his sword. "Why the hell are you here?" he asked forcefully. Naruto glared at the ex-captain, knowing full well why he was here. He didn't say anything though. "Do you really not understand why I'm here?" he asked. "You two take it upon yourselves to invade the human world, mobilize 5 Aaron and then lose them in battle. It was all against orders. You understand, right?" Aizen-sama is furious. "Grimmjow. Naruto. We're going. Your punishment will be decided in Huecomundo, both of you." Tosen finished, as he opened up a garganta to take them back to Huecomundo. This time it was Naruto who spoke up. "Now, wait just a minute here. Aizen obviously sent you to bring us back, possibly by force. Just what makes you think you can tell me to do anything, huh? Do you want a repeat of what happened last time, where I wiped that pretty little sense of justice of yours on my boot?" Naruto goaded, getting as close to Tosen's face as possible. "You bastard!" Tosen muttered, cold anger creeping into his voice. "But, whatever. I'll go back to Huecomundo and take this so-called punishment of yours. Of course, it's not like Aizen's actually going to do anything, now is he?" Naruto said, as he walked into the garganta ahead of Tosen. Tosen glared for a few seconds longer, before he regained his peace and stepped into the garganta. Grimmjow followed behind him. "Wait! Where are you going?" Ichigo shouted up towards the blue-haired Aaron. "Shut the fuck up already. I'm going back to Huecomundo. Stop fucking with me. You come here and attack, and think you can just leave when you feel like it? Stop joking around, and get your ass back here. Our fight isn't over yet. You shut the fuck up. Me leaving is the only reason you're still alive right now. That technique you have hurts you, and I know you could only get 2 or 3 more shots with that thing. And even then you're still no match for me. Don't forget my name, and pray that you don't hear it a second time. Because if you do, you're dead meat." Ichigo stared and stared, thinking of nothing he could say to the Espada. Grimmjow grinned psychotically, and bore a close resemblance to a jungle cat with that grin. Grimmjow Jiggerjacks. Back in Huecomundo, Grimmjow and Naruto walked through the Hall of Las Noches towards the throne room, where they would apparently receive their punishment for their actions. "You really went wild back there in the real world. You even told them your name, though I assume you didn't give any information away about the Espada," Naruto said. Grimmjow said nothing in return. "By the way, we ran into a little bit of a difficulty in our trip to the human world. One of your fraction decided to blab important information about the Espada, and what we are. So Soul Society knows about our little group by now, even if they have no specific information about individual members. Despite that, I had to put Shalong down before he said something important," Naruto said. There was no hint of an apology in his voice at all. "Whatever, I don't care. Just tell me when you're ready to move out, and I'll do my part from that point on," Grimmjow replied. "I'm looking forward to it," Naruto remarked as he opened the double doors to the throne room. Aizen was of course sitting on his throne in the center, and Tosen was off to the right. Jin was nowhere to be seen. Ever since the 3 captains had defected from Soul Society, they had undergone several appearance changes. Aizen for one slicked back his hair and ditched the glasses, and Tosen let his braids out. The 2 Arrancar walked up to the throne, neither of them bowing or getting on their knees. Tosen however did bow in respect for his leader, before he turned to both rebellious Arrancar. "Welcome back, Naruto," Grimmjow, Aizen said calmly, a small smile on his face. "Well, Do you two think you should be saying sorry for something? Tosen asked the two Arrancar. Not really / fuck you, said Grimmjow and Naruto respectively. Naruto in particular didn't even bother looking at Tosen before cursing him out like that. You bastards! Tosen began. It's fine, Kan-aim. Aizen's voice rang out before them. I'm not even the least bit upset, because after all, one with such a fiery spirit would take responsibility for one's own actions. Am I mistaken, Grimmjow? Naruto? Aizen asked. You are. Grimmjow said. Naruto didn't say anything. That tore it for Tosen. He grabbed the collar of Grimmjow's Arrancar vest and pulled tightly, glaring at the Arrancar. Aizen-sama, please give me permission to execute these two, he shouted. The way I see it, you just hate me, don't you, Tosen? From day one, you couldn't stand me. Grimmjow muttered, a smirk on his face. Naruto allowed himself a small laugh at Tosen's sake. I have no tolerance for those who seek to cause chaos. For Aizen-sama's sake, that's all there is to it. Tosen responded. Grimmjow shook his head. You never missed the chance to bring up your moral, righteous bullshit. He mocked. Yes, moral justice. Something that your behavior is highly lacking in, for justice without morals is the same as senseless murder. However, murder in the name of moral justice is. Tosen trailed off, as he drew his sword. Righteous, he said as he lopped off Grimmjow's left arm. He went for Naruto's directly after that, only to be halted completely by Naruto's arrow. Tosen balked as his sword failed to get through the defense, and Naruto stared at him ruthlessly. The only thing that happened was that Naruto's robe had gotten scuffed. Tosen, you are the biggest fucking hypocrite to ever walk this desert. Do you realize how much everyone tires of your endless, justice, preaching crap? Because they do. Honestly, in this line of work you'd be more suited being as wantonly destructive as me or Grimmjow. But instead you spout out all this nonsense about how murder is righteous and justice this and justice that. It's not righteous, and if you honestly believe that anything we're doing is righteous, then you're delusional. There is no justice here, so your attitude makes me sick. When you enter Hueco you leave all that bullshit at the fucking door. I knew a hollow like you before, his name was Furimose. I killed him, and the only thing that's stopping me from killing you is Aizen-sama. And that's another thing, you fucking piece of shit lapdog. Your bitch-ass morals have been used by Aizen and whoever for who knows how long because you're gullible enough to believe that they're leading you towards a world of justice and righteousness. All the while you talk about killing for the sake of a greater justice that everyone here is working hard to prevent. Suck my cock. Naruto patted down his arm before he shoved Tosen off of him. The former captain recovered instantly, focusing his attention on Grimmjow's severed arm. Hada number 54, Heian, he cried, as a blaze of purple fire incinerated Grimmjow's arm so it could never be reattached to him. Naruto scowled. Grimmjow was going to get demoted after that. Afterwards, Tosen fixed him with a glare that said, I'll remember this. Grimmjow meanwhile stormed out of the throne room, his mood turning sour since he had gotten his arm chopped off. Naruto looked up at Aizen, who was profoundly neutral to the whole thing. His speech towards Tosen had been a largely bold move, but Aizen didn't seem to mind. When his boss said nothing to him, he turned his back to Tosen and Aizen and walked out behind Grimmjow. He had some new business to take care of. Later that evening, Naruto stood out in front of a very particular door in Las Noches. There were sounds of whirring and drilling going on in the inside, but these sounds were only made every once in a while, when an espada happened to die or get demoted. He stood out in front of the door, not even bothering to hide his Ryatsu or hide in the shadows. The door slammed open forcefully as a short androgynous-looking Arrancar stepped out the door, his sleeves flapping in a very flamboyant-looking manner. He walked with a strut, and a smug grin was perched on his face. His Arrancar uniform currently wasn't showing his right hip, where the number 7 had recently gotten tattooed there, showing that he was Grimmjow's replacement into the espada. It didn't take long for him to notice Naruto standing right there. What are you doing here, Naruto? Come to lament your punishment. I know you're getting demoted too after you resisted Tosen-san. You better run along now, you don't want to be seen disobeying an Espada as well. Is this idiot stupid? Why the fuck does Luppy think I'm getting demoted? Aizen doesn't give a shit about what I said to Tosen or how I acted in the human world. I'm still the damn Primera. Despite the fact that his thoughts were sound, Naruto didn't say anything to Luppy despite his tirade. The new Espada took it as a sign of respect, and he held his head up high before he walked right past Naruto. He turned back around when he heard a Zanpakuto become unsheathed. He saw the gleam of the metal as Naruto contemplated his move, before Naruto put his Zanpakuto back into its sheath. He glared at the Primera. What do you think you're doing, Naruto? He asked angrily, a hand on his own Zanpakuto. Naruto had his back to the new Septima, before he turned around to show Luppy an animalistic grin. Luppy couldn't even react before he was impaled through the chest by Naruto's hand, blood pouring the wound as he lost the grip on his sheathed Zanpakuto. Despite that, the Espada stopped himself from falling to one knee. Naruto laughed loudly, his euphoria stimulated by the thrill of the murder. Sorry, Luppy. I won't accept anyone other than Grimmjow than the Septima Espada, so I'm afraid you're gonna have to take a little old dirt nap now. It's been nice knowing you during your service as an Espada, he shouted, as he charged up an orange Siro. He grabbed the wounded Luppy's collar, the Siro now at point-blank range. Luppy whimpered as his eyes widened, and he looked for any possible way to escape the situation. The Siro was beginning to look a little bit big for his tastes. Naruto sighed in pleasure, as fired the Siro. Luppy screamed in agony as the entire top half of his body was obliterated by Naruto's blast, leaving a set of white-clothed legs where Luppy once was. Septima Espada, my ass. Naruto remarked, thinking about how easily Luppy went down. Even if they were 6 ranks apart, that display right there was simply pathetic beyond all measure. He gets into a bad situation and completely loses it. It makes sense though, there aren't really that many Arrancar in Las Noches who can fill even the lowest Espada position, let alone the Septima. Luppy was probably the best Aizen had, and any future ones will likely be even weaker. Naruto walked away after dragging the remainder of Luppy's body away from the hallway. He would dispose of the corpse later, there were things to be done to prepare for the rebellion. He and Sale had made a breakthrough when it came to Aizen's Shirkai, and now they just had to wait until they secured a stable path to Soul Society. Kurosaki Ichigo's consciousness was a very, very fragile thing to behold. While at certain times it seemed like his willpower couldn't be beaten by anyone, especially when it came to his friends, there was actually a much deeper facet to his personality than that. When Ichigo lost, it was customary for him to fall into a deep depression. This time he had lost twice in a short period of time, and it didn't help that he had an inner hollow constantly breathing down his neck. He was draped across his bed, unmoving with his eyes so lidded they looked like they were closed. He moaned and groaned every once in a while, but otherwise didn't say anything. His family, Rukia, and Khan had all left him alone for the time being, so he was laying there alone, staring at his ceiling lamp. His bandaged body ached tremendously, but he didn't give that any thought at all. All he was thinking about was how weak he was, how he had failed to protect his friends and his town from the Arrancar. He vaguely noticed someone opening the window from the outside, but he didn't even care. The hollow in him was acting up again, he could feel his cold presence edging ever closer to him, and the damnable grin on his face ever present. It was going to devour him and his personality, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it. Whoa, you really let that last fight mess you up? Came a smooth voice from outside the window. Ichigo didn't even register the voice, considering his inner hollow was speaking to him about something. His hollow's voice was coming out as a garbled blur, no words were understandable. Leave him alone, Hatake. We're not here to comment on his condition, but rather to give him the report. Came a second voice, which seemed to hold far more authority than the voice that was apparently Kakashi's. Yes, Hitsugaya Taishu. he said, as the young, white-haired captain emerged onto the windowsill right next to Kakashi. Ichigo took note of them for the first time by looking their way. "Toshiro. Kakashi-san." He muttered, his voice cracked with hopelessness and depression. Kakashi's sweat dropped, the gloom was beginning to rub off on him and he could practically taste it in the air. "Well, putting your depression aside for now, there are a few things that we need to talk to you about first. Would you care to explain it to him, Hitsugaya Taishu?" "Yeah," Hitsugaya muttered, before he looked down at his arms which were resting on his lap. "Gigace were so cumbersome. The Arrancar are far more powerful than we could have ever anticipated. The group that we fought the other night, there were only Gillian and Ajuchas class Arrancar in that. No Vasto Lorde. If a simple Gillian became that much more powerful through becoming an Arrancar, then I don't know what we're going to do." The captain trailed off, and noticed that Ichigo was at least listening to them now. "All 5 of the Arrancar that we fought were killed, some in more interesting ways. However, the one that you and Hadake were fighting returned to Huecomundo alive, and it seemed to be the strongest of the bunch. Hadake said that the Arrancar's name was Grimjow, and that he was Arrancar 7 or 7. We would like to know if you received any information on him or his abilities. Honestly, I don't even know if you could call what I did a fight. I was so easily defeated that it was humiliating, and I didn't even get any information on him besides his name." Kakashi commented. He rubbed a spot on his abdomen where Grimjow had nearly killed him. That seemed to be the wrong thing to say, as Ichigo slumped back down into another depression. He didn't speak to either of them for so long that Kakashi almost spoke up. Despite that, he finally answered before Kakashi managed to get something out. "Grimjow. Jigerjax. That was his full name," Ichigo said glumly, before he scratched the back of his hand. "To be honest, I don't know. He defeated me so easily that I didn't gain any knowledge on his abilities or anything like that. He was a blue-haired Arrancar with an open vest, but Kakashi can tell you that. Other than that, I know he fights with really strong Hakuda." "I see," Hitsugaya muttered, apparently disappointed. "That only strengthens the evidence," he remarked. Ichigo and Kakashi looked at him quizzically. "What do you mean, Hitsugaya Taishu?" Kakashi asked. "What I mean is that this entire war may cost us more casualties than we realize. During my fight with an Arrancar named Shalong Tsufang, I was led on to some very important information. Within Aizen's Arrancar forces, there are multiple ranks in the system. The ones that myself, Matsumoto, Abarai, and Madarame fought were all ones called numeros. They have numbers from 11 downwards. The Arrancar that you two fought, this Grimjow, is most likely among the Espada rank. Espada. They are the 10 strongest Arrancar within Aizen's forces, ranked 1 to 10 based on how strong or weak they are. Grimjow Jigerjax holds the rank of 7, meaning that he is the 7th Espada. And given how easily you two were defeated by him, these Espada are strong. That is why I wanted to get as much information on that Espada as possible. We need to be prepared for them, but unfortunately we have a startling lack of information on who they are or what their abilities are." "I see. You were relying on me to get that information." Ichigo trailed off. The depression was back in full force, and Kakashi's sweat dropped again. He himself had been beaten far easier than Ichigo, but he wasn't moping around like this. Hitsugaya sighed. "Don't worry about it, it's just one part of this entire war. We have 10 of those guys to look out for, after all, not to mention the 3 renegade captains from Soul Society," Hitsugaya said, as he jumped out of the window. Before he managed to do so, Ichigo interrupted him. "Wait, Toshiro. There was a second Arrancar there with Grimjow after I had been defeated, and I know for a fact it wasn't any of the Arrancar you fought." Hitsugaya halted and Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "Care to explain?" the masked Shinigami said. Ichigo closed his eyes and sighed, trying to remember the events of the previous night. "It isn't much. I didn't see him until one of the rogue captains came here to drag them back to Huecomundo. From my standpoint, I couldn't hear anything that he said, and his appearance was such a blur. He trailed off, the face becoming no clearer in his head. Short size, blonde hair, that's all I remember about that Aaron car. He suppressed his ryatsu extraordinarily well, and he seemed keen on hiding his face from me. Hitsugaya mulled over that for a moment, trying to reach a suitable conclusion on the mysterious Aaron car that Ichigo had encountered after fighting Grimmjow. Another espada? No, it's too early to assume that. For all we know, that Aaron car could simply be another subordinate of Jigerjack's that decided not to join the battle. He said out loud, as Kakashi and Ichigo thought over it as well. A very mysterious Aaron car, and unfortunately there is no real way to procure any more information on it, Hitsugaya said, before he jumped out of Ichigo's window, apparently done talking. We'll make sure to let you know if anything else important comes up. Kakashi added as an afterthought, before he too jumped out of the window to leave Ichigo to his own devices. Ichigo laid there in his best for a few more hours easily, but instead of his thoughts being plagued by depression, they were plagued by uncertainty and confusion. He grit his teeth and resisted the urge to punch the wall. After that, he rose to his feet and put on a jacket after grabbing his substitute Shinigami badge. He had visors to find. The orange-haired substitute Shinigami stood outside an old, abandoned warehouse, looking at it with distaste. So, they lived here, they didn't even have a shred of class. But, it was bizarre, there was something about this building that stood out. Everything was avoiding it, the birds, the cats, and even the ants didn't even notice it was there. He walked into the warehouse, seeing a multitude of figures standing around at various places. Shinji, the de facto leader of the group, was hovering in mid-air in front of him. He had been the one to talk to Ichigo these past few weeks, and Ichigo had never actually met any of the other visored besides one. So, it seems you finally found our hiding place, said Shinji, as all 9 visored stood in the rafters or on top of boxes. It was a varied ragtag group of misfits. That look on your face, it looks like you've been searching for us all day, haven't you? We tried to make it as easy as possible to find us so even you could locate this place, but I guess it wasn't enough. But, whatever. I guess you're determined to become one of us now, right? Hell no! Ichigo shouted at the top of his lungs, making Shinji balk and back up a little bit. Ichigo looked around, there seemed to be 9 visored in total. Me, become one of you guys? You've gotta be kidding me, the only thing I wanna do with you guys, is use you. I won't join up with you guys, but I'm sure that you can teach me how to quiet down the hollow that's inside of me, Ichigo explained. All 9 of the visored were looking a little annoyed by now, all except for an old man off to the side who wore a calm expression. Well, look at you talkin' big. And what makes you think we're just gonna do that? Shinji challenged. Ichigo didn't look even the slightest bit perturbed, but his head was hung dangerously low. I'll just force you to do it, then. He said, as he pulled out his substitute Shinigami badge and placed it over his chest. He left his body easily and grabbed his butcher knife Sanpakuto, flashing towards Shinji. Oh man, you're a crazy one alright. He muttered. Shinji's Sanpakuto laid over to the side, before he kicked it up with his foot, ready to block Ichigo. Wait! Shinji-kun, came a voice. Ichigo stopped his assault to notice that he had been blocked by the old man that had been sitting off to the side away from everyone else. I'll stop him, he said. He was a strong old man, despite the fact that his body would suggest otherwise. He was a relatively short old man, and was dressed in just about what one would expect from someone in his advanced age. Though he was wearing this strange hat that wouldn't be out of place in the Edo period of Japan's history. Sarutobi Hiruzen, a pleasure to meet you, he said, after he had pulled his Zanpakuto out of its sheath, and flashed towards the boy, blocking Ichigo's Zanpakuto easily. 1 month later. Within Las Noches, Aizen was watching a very peculiar display on a hologram in front of his throne. The orange-haired girl, Inu Oriheim's power was incredibly interesting. Yami completely obliterated that human boy's arm, and Oriheim had managed to heal it like it was nothing. No, not healing. Healing was an incredibly generic power, and Captain Unohana could easily do that. This was a completely different kind of power. Her power wasn't healing. "What is your power, girl?" Aizen mused, as on the screen the strange power expanding to cover a wider area. Within the Las Noches archives, Naruto was watching the same display on the main monitor. The human boy with the messed up arm was healed completely by the girl, even though by all means he should be permanently without an arm. "Well, this is one interesting power, and I think I can make use of this," he said, thinking back to how Grimmjow's arm was completely destroyed by Tosen. Yami was getting his lost arm reattached at the moment, but with Grimmjow there was nothing to reattach. Naruto wouldn't accept anyone but him at the rank, and if he couldn't heal that arm he would be without a Septima in the end. Was Aizen trying to slow him down or something? Ulquiorra had already told him that Aizen planned to kidnap that girl anyway, for some reason. The Hogyoka deteriorated if he used it too much, so they needed to repair. It was probably the biggest load of crap Naruto had ever heard in his life. He shut down the monitor. The operation to capture that girl was soon. He had hoped that he would get to be the one to go capture her, but this was more Ulquiorra's forte. He could manipulate her into thinking that she had to come with them. Naruto would probably just scare her off, or he would just kill her right there. Whatever, Aizen was creating a very special errand car today, so he couldn't dwell on it for long. He rose from the ornate chair he was sitting in and exited the building. The Hogyoku's chamber was right next to the archive, so he didn't have long before he reached there. He opened the big double doors, and noticed that pretty much everyone was there already. The Espada were being called to witness the birth of a brand new errand car that was apparently essential to their victory. "So, you came." "Naruto," Aizen said from the center of the room, where he was standing over a bandaged figure contained in a glass box. The hollow's arms and legs were apparently bound by Kido, and Aizen was holding up the Hogyoku. "How's the damned Hogyoku?" he asked. Aizen smiled. 50%. Right on schedule, according to Soul Society, that is. Of course, there is no way to directly understand unless you're the one holding the Hogyoku. The Hogyoku was sealed away right after its development, so not even Urahara Kisuke could know about this. That by temporarily fusing with one who has at least twice the Ryatsu of a captain-class Shinigami, it will instantaneously have the same level of power as the fully awakened Hogyoku. The area began to glow with a yellow light, and the glass box containing the bandaged hollow shattered into pieces and scattered throughout the area. "Can you tell us your name, comrade?" Kneeling in the middle where the box once was a blonde childlike Aaronkar with a dopey-looking face. He was completely nude, allowing the hollow hole on his sternum to be revealing. His mask fragment was a tiara-like piece on his forehead. He had purple eyes and freckles, as well as a viciously bad snaggletooth that poked out from his mouth. His zanpakuto, which lay at his side, was an Egyptian-style sword that was about half the size of his own body. All in all, he looked bizarre. Wonderweiss. Wonderweiss Margila," he said. His voice literally sounded like a mentally retarded child. Naruto whistled. Aizen really did a number on this one, taking all his intelligence, perceptions, and memories, and creating an Aaronkar who was effectively an autistic child. All just to counter Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni's zanpakuto, according to the files. He chuckled, making a few other Espada look at him in confusion. "I am just getting weapons of all kinds today. Ulquiorra, you remember the orders I gave you already, correct?" Aizen said, cutting Naruto out of his thoughts. The melancholic Quinta Espada hopped off his perch in the back of the room, walking up to the center of the room next to Wonderweiss. Ulquiorra then closed his eyes, and looked pensive. "Of course. Execute them. I'm giving you the power to make the command, you may take anyone you like." Aizen said. "Understood. Oh, that's right. Why don't you come along, Grimmjow?" Aizen remarked, before he turned around to see the former Espada sitting on the highest ledge of the room. Grimmjow scowled. Naruto frowned. He definitely wasn't going to go on this mission if he could help it. He had already seen enough of the real world for the time being, and they could definitely handle it on their own. Not to mention the fact that they had negation on standby should anything go wrong. Still, he wanted to fight that Kurosaki kid for himself. Grimmjow and Yami had apparently gotten a shot at him, he wanted his turn. He debated with himself for a final moment before he reached a conclusion. I'm going with you guys. I've been bored lately, so I'll meet you all when we open the Garganta. Naruto mumbled to Aizen, who smirked at him as he left the room. Ulquiorra, Grimmjow, Yami, and Wonderweiss all gathered in the center of the room, ready to discuss the details of the mission. 3 hours later, and they found Naruto standing outside the gate to the interior of Las Noches. He was looking down at the sands below, apparently reminiscing over his time as a regular hollow. So, I take it we're about to get going, he commented, looking over the 4 other errand car that had arrived. 3 Espada, 1 former Espada, and an errand car that apparently had the Ryatsu of an Espada. It was a solid team, one that should definitely be a big enough threat to flush Inu Oriheim out of hiding. Of course, Ulquiorra wouldn't be fighting, though. He would be off on his own, retrieving the girl while she lingered in the Dangai. No doubt as soon as their presence was announced, she would rush to the living world. That was Ulquiorra's opportunity. Before we go there, I have something I want to say to all of you. In our last trip to the real world, Shalong managed to spill the beans about the existence of our group, which means it's safe to assume that Soul Society knows about the Espada by now. Despite that, Grimmjow, you're likely the only one they have only information on, even if it is likely just your name. Because of that, I want you to refrain from saying your rank, status, or even your name to any Shinigami we may fight. This mostly just applies to Yami and myself. Naruto said. Mixed reactions from the group. Ulquiorra and Grimmjow were stoic, because the latter was already briefed on this information. Wonderweiss groaned something in that strange high-pitched voice of his, and Yami scratched his scalp. If you say so. I won't say anything. The Decima said stupidly. Let us go. Ulquiorra said simply, when Naruto was finished talking. He pressed his finger against the air, and the 5 Arrancar watched as a Garganta opened right before their eyes. It closed, and exactly 3 minutes later it opened again in the real world. The first crack of light peered through the void, and Naruto grimaced. Ugh, this place makes me sick. So many humans everywhere, and it's so damn bright. He commented, looking towards his group. Ulquiorra had already taken off in another direction in the void, which left Grimmjow, Yami, and Wonderweiss with him. Alright boys, you ready to tear some Shinigami a new asshole? He smirked, as Yami cheered right beside him. Grimmjow was still sulking, but he looked a little more excited now that he was actually here. The Garganta opened completely, directly over a spot where most of the Shinigami reinforcements were training. Grimmjow. I don't want to steal your prey, but would you mind if I took the Kurosaki kid for around this time? You can stay here and fight these guys. Naruto said. Grimmjow glared at the Primera for a second before he scoffed. Whatever, I don't care. Just leave him alive for me to kill. He said. Naruto grinned, before he crossed his fingers behind his back. Can do. I'll leave these guys to you 3. Looks like there are 4 of them down there, including a captain. He lied. He uncrossed his fingers before he rushed away to find Ichigo. The other 3 looked at each other before they stepped out of the Garganta. We came out at a fun place, didn't we? Yami remarked, before he received lackluster reactions from the group. Grimmjow didn't look at him, and Wonderweiss was still spacing out. Hey, we're going, new guy. How long are you gonna space out? He shouted, before he noticed that Wonderweiss was playing with a moth, trying to catch it. Ugh, looks like we've got another weirdo in our group. He said. Down below, the Shinigami who were doing Bankai training noticed the ripple in the sky, and the 4 Arrancar that stepped out of the void. The Arrancar versus the 4 Shinigami there, Hitsugaya Toshiro, Matsumoto Ranjaku, Madarame Ikaku and Ayasegawa Yumachika. Aaron Carr. No way, it's too soon. Yumachika cried, stopping the Bankai training he was going through to stare up at the multitude of Aaron Carr. The Shinigami witnessed one go off to the side elsewhere, but he was too fast for anyone to stop him. Yami stretched as he walked in the sun, but he didn't have any time to do anything else as he drew his large Zanpakuto and blocked a sword attack from a Shinigami down below. 10th Division Captain Hitsugaya Toshiro, he introduced. Yami was about to retort with his own introduction, before he remembered what Naruto said about that. He wisely kept his mouth shut. Ikaku and Yumachika both stared down the blue-haired Aaron Carr, not knowing what to say. The vicious grin on his face made them highly unnerved, and Ikaku and Yumachika had already released their Zanpakuto. Ranjaku was facing Wonder Weiss, and looking profoundly confused on whether or not she should fight him. The limit was already released, and Hitsugaya was already in his Shurikai. He swung his Dragon of Ice at Yami, bringing it back as Yami was encased in the frozen water. That is, right before the ice cracked and Yami burst forth from it unharmed. What the hell was that? It got chilly for a second, he mocked. Hitsugaya grunted, even with the limit lifted he was still having trouble. Was this Aaron Carr an espada or something? Even with the limit lifted, it looks like I still need my Bankai, he thought to himself, as he held his sword out in front of him. Water and ice rushed into existence from his Zanpakuto. Bankai! Daiguren Hyorinmaru, 1, he shouted, as he grew dragon wings of ice, and the lotus petals behind him came into existence once again. He readied himself for the fight. Over to the side, Grimmjow hadn't even drawn against Ikaku and Yumachika, though Yumachika was already getting worn out against the former espada. He smacked the 5th seat silly without his Zanpakuto, looking bored all the while. That was, before he noticed the captain's Bankai that was out in full force. Hey, Yami! Let's switch. Let me take that kid you're fighting, and you can have these 3 scrubs over here, he shouted, as he muscled Yami out of his turf. By force. Grimmjow, bastard, the Decima shouted, as he flew over to where the non-captain Shinigami were located. They didn't really look all that strong, and Grimmjow had already messed one of them up. It was pretty disappointing. TCH, whatever. I guess I'll just clean up the rest of this trash, here. While Yami grappled with the others, Grimmjow surveyed his new Bankai-using opponent. A fucking kid was all what this captain was, but he did have the luxury of a Bankai. Hitsugaya was surveying him anxiously. Blue hair, you are Grimmjow Jigerjax, correct? The Septima Espada. Hitsugaya asked tentatively, trying to get a grasp on who his opponent was. Grimmjow smirked. Did Shalong tell you that? The name is Grimmjow, but I ain't an espada anymore. It still won't stop me from kicking your ass, even if I only have one arm, he said, drawing his Zanpakuto with his single arm. With brutalizing speed, Grimmjow flashed right in front of Hitsugaya. The young captain balked at Grimmjow's Sonido skills, just getting his ice wings up in time to guard. Still, Grimmjow's blade smashed against the ice, breaking off a good chunk of it. Hitsugaya tried to retaliate, but Grimmjow thrust the mid-air ice forward with his Zanpakuto, blinding the captain and halting his attack. Grimmjow chuckled, before he held his Zanpakuto to the side with his one arm, firing a Siro from his palm at the disoriented captain. Hitsugaya shook the ice out of his face, before he flew to the left of the attack. He rushed forward towards his Aaron Carr opponent, sword at the ready. Hitsugaya's Zanpakuto clanged against Grimmjow's as the two fought, Hitsugaya pressing the one-armed Grimmjow back with his hard, quick, and heavy strikes. Still, Grimmjow blocked every one of them, but when Hitsugaya was finished attacking, Grimmjow's arm was frozen. Is this all there is to a captain-class Shinigami? Your Bankai is barely more impressive than that other Shinigami. He taunted, shaking loose his arm from the ice, which had only frozen over superficially. He used Sonido again, flashing out of existence and slashing off Hitsugaya's other wing completely and wounding his shoulder. Hitsugaya gasped in pain and he stumbled in place. The young captain then plummeted to the earth, his balance lost, and his shoulder wounded. "Taicho!" Ranjika cried, as she began focusing her efforts on Yami. With their captain gone, it seemed like the Shinigami were in deep trouble. Over on the other side of town, Ichigo rushed out of the visored hideout after he had felt Grimmjow's Ryatsu. His will and his abilities were at their peak after his month-long training of how to use his hollow in battle, and after all that was done he could keep his mask on for approximately 11 seconds before it cracked. It was better than nothing, and with his new abilities he was confident that he could beat Grimmjow. He sped through the skies of town, rushing to wherever the Ryatsu was so he could finally defeat Grimmjow in a one-on-one fight. He ran into Naruto approximately a half-mile away from the visored warehouse. The blonde hair, the relatively short stature, red eyes, the masked fox ears that curved underneath his eyes, and the war paint astigma. He matched the errand car that was there on that night. You were there on that night. You're the other errand car that was there with Grimmjow, he shouted, as Naruto grinned at him cheekily. This kid had guts. So you did notice me after all. He mused. Get out of my way. I'm not interested in fighting you. Ichigo murmured, as he drew his Zanpakuto. Naruto raised an eyebrow, before he sighed and shook his head. I know you're looking for Grimmjow at the moment, and he is here in the human world. You're still sore from your last defeat with him, so obviously you want to fight him now. But... He released his orange Ryatsu, letting it wash all over Ichigo. The substitute Shinigami, sweating, as he stared with shock at Naruto. I don't really feel like letting you pass right now. I hope that's okay. He said sarcastically. I think you'll find that I'm a suitable substitute for Grimmjow now. He released his Ryatsu a little bit more. You've got my attention. Ichigo wheezed, before the orange boy charged up some black and red Ryatsu. Bankai, he shouted, as the familiar robe and black blade entered into view. Naruto looked at it, a little amused by how different it was from a normal Bankai. Oh, that's the infamous Bankai, huh? The one that lost to Grimmjow so easily, he asked. It can't be helped, if you're going to be Grimmjow's substitute, then I'll show you how much I've changed in this past month, he said, as he placed a hand on his face. Naruto glared in confusion as Ryatsu was formed near his face. Ichigo brought his hand down, and in its place a very distinctive hollow mask appeared. It even had the black hollow eyes so customary of their race. Naruto's eyes widened as the mask appeared and Ichigo's Ryatsu grew tremendously. It was clearly a Spada level, even though he would no match for him at all. What did you do? He asked, before he growled at the Shinigami turned hollow. Sorry. No time to explain. Ichigo said. His voice had gotten far more gravelly, like there was the presence of two individuals rather than just one. It also sounded hollow-like. He flashed out of existence, the dual Bankai and hollow mask power giving him incredible speed. He appeared before Naruto, a Getsuga flaring on his Zanpakuto, as he released the wave of Ryatsu when he was right next to Naruto. The Primera Espada backflipped over the Ryatsu, landing higher in the air than Ichigo. He heard a whoosh of noise behind him, and sensed Ichigo standing right above him. The visor slashed at Naruto, and Naruto's fist shot out at Ichigo. The blade made contact with the skin, but Naruto's arrow was holding strong, and Ichigo failed to injure him. Ichigo, for all he was worth, was surprised just how resilient this Arrancar was, and how even in hollow form he was losing the advantage. Naruto's movements were smooth and fast, and there was little error in his technique. Naruto grinned, before he used a quick Sonido to get past Ichigo quite easily. He thrust his palm out trying to impale Ichigo, but the boy redirected the force of the strike with his Zanpakuto, parrying the attack. He counterattacked with a forward stab, but Naruto bypassed it and grabbed the blade. Ichigo tried to wrestle it from Naruto's grasp, but Naruto flipped into the air, effectively handstanding on the edge of the Zanpakuto. With his opponent bound tightly, he snapped forward with a 360-degree hook kick from that odd position. A portion of Ichigo's mask broke off as the kick impacted the left side of his face. The force wrestled Naruto loose from the blade, as Ichigo skidded back a distance away. Naruto flipped onto the ground, his wacky movements becoming a little too much for Ichigo to handle. "So, what the hell did you do to yourself?" Naruto asked cockily, as the battle turned out to be easier than he expected. That last kick of his had taken off half of Ichigo's mask. "I told you, I don't have time to explain," Ichigo panted. While he was out of breath and injured, Naruto was unscratched and hardly out of breath. The battle was too one-sided. "Geez, kid. Even with that increase in your powers, you still suck this badly. Where's all that talk about how much you've improved over the past month now, huh?" "Shut up," Ichigo shouted. "How does it feel, kid? Knowing that even with all the hard work you've done this past month, you're still going to lose to me. You're still going to die, because I'm going to have no mercy on you. And then while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and kill all your family and friends. Slowly. Slowly and horrifically, they'll all die." Naruto cackled, the grumpy mood he'd been having during his time with Aizen lifting somewhat. He was beginning to go back to his old self. "Bastard. Don't you dare. Now I know why Grinjao hates you so much. You always have this damnable furrowed look on your face, and whenever one thing goes in your favor you get overconfident. Even though you're so damn weak, despite that huge pool of Ryatsu you've got. It's a crime to be that weak when you have potential to be so strong, something that needs to be punished." He trailed off, before he laughed uproariously. He looked around, before he pointed at himself. "Huh, what's that? You want me to be the one that punishes you? Well, if you insist I'll happily oblige," he shouted very loudly before he loudly. Ichigo looked at him oddly. "Are you insane?" he asked. "You'd better prepare yourself, kid. Because..." He moaned in ecstasy as an idea formed in his head. "I'm gonna rip your fucking heart out." He growled, like a feral animal ready to attack its prey. Ichigo suddenly looked very uncomfortable, and one could tell that even behind his mask. Naruto's bizarre dialogue made Ichigo pause for just a second, but that was all the Primera Espada needed to exploit the opening. He used Sonido to get in his guard and directly behind him, before Ichigo could even react properly. He grasped the Zanpakuto with his bare hand and pulled, trying to wrench it from his grasp. He wrapped his other arm around Ichigo's neck, squeezing him in a choke hold. Ichigo gasped for breath, and Naruto spoke up. "Seeing your kind trying to imitate us hollows make me very upset. When I get upset, I have the tendency to get a teensy tiny bit violence, if you know what I mean. I haven't felt this bloodlusted in a long time, before I entered Aizen's service. You seem to bring out the worst in me, kid, and I thank you for that. Let's make this fun, shall we?" he whispered. With one firm tug, Naruto wrenched the Zanpakuto from Ichigo's grasp and threw it across the sky. Ichigo gasped in surprise as his weapon went flying over the horizon, before it got stuck in a rooftop a distance away. He tried to free himself from Naruto's grip, but since then Naruto had wrapped his free arm around Ichigo's midsection. The other one remained around his neck, choking the life out of Ichigo. "First, let us get rid of this damn mask," Naruto muttered, before he placed his on the side of the mask. He tugged with all might, watching the mask material crack underneath the pressure. Ichigo was howling as his Ryatsu was beginning to act up. It was leaking from the opening on where Naruto was pulling on the mask. Naruto grunted, before he lifted the mask clean off of Ichigo's face. Black and red Ryatsu flowed out from Ichigo's face, and his visor transformation became undone as his Ryatsu went back to normal Bankai levels. His face exposed, and Naruto got to look at it again. "Ah, that's better. You have no idea how much rage seeing that mask adorn your face provided. Now that you're just a Shinigami again, my anger has diminished," he said, before he flashed forward. He kicked Ichigo right in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Ichigo plummeted towards Earth at an incredibly high velocity, so much so that he would make a wide crater when he impacted. Naruto appeared on the ground before Ichigo did, holding his arms out like he was going to catch him. But, at the last second, Naruto instead gave him a brutal roundhouse kick straight to the head, tempered by Ryatsu. It almost caved in his skull completely. Ichigo skid down the street clumsily, made a deep skid in the road before he stopped. Naruto sauntered up to him casually, standing over him as he looked at the defeated boy. He was bruised and beaten all over. There was no way he could move about in that condition, even with Bankai. Sugi no Mai. Hakurin. Came a female voice from behind him. Naruto turned around and gave an "oh, please, look," before he dodged the oncoming blast of ice easily. This female Shinigami he had seen at the invasion around a month ago, and she had gotten taken out super easily by Grinjao in one strike. He flashed right next to her, and before she could react had backhanded her right across the face. "Rukia!" Ichigo shouted, as he struggled to get up. "Don't move!" Naruto shouted, before he flashed over to Ichigo, who was struggling to get up. He charged up an orange Siro and placed it next to Ichigo's head, creating a point-blank attack that was sure to kill him in one hit. "It's been fun, kid, don't believe that it hasn't been. But, now it's about time for you to say nighty-night," Naruto muttered, as Ichigo's eyes widened. His body was out of it and wouldn't respond. Even if he was just a few kicks and a removal of his mask, Naruto's attacks were strong and just a few of them was enough to bring him down for good. The orange lit up his face significantly, causing the Primera Espada to look considerably more evil as he was about to blast Ichigo's head into oblivion. However, before he could fire it, another Siro rushed towards Naruto's body. This one was red in color, and Naruto dodged it quickly, almost too late. I don't really like butting in during Shinigami fights, but I guess it really can't be helped this time, came a voice from on top of a nearby roof. Naruto glared, and looked to the side, before his eyes widened. There was a blonde-haired human carrying a Zanpakuto standing on the rooftop, but not just anyone. He had seen this human, no, Shinigami before. "Hirako!" Ichigo whispered. In his first attack on Konoha, this Shinigami had been called there as backup to help fight him. It had ended in the Shinigami's loss, but Naruto had never forgot that opponent. I remember you," Naruto said. That wasn't the response Shinji had expected from Naruto, and he narrowed his eyes at the prospective opponent. "That's so. I don't remember ever seeing you before though. Who are you, Arrancar?" Naruto shut his eyes for a moment, placing a hand on his forehead in deep thought. He finally removed it from his face, releasing his Ryatsu in order to intimidate his opponent. "No, it doesn't really matter, but I will say this. How's Konoha doing?" he said cheekily. Shinji's eyes widened as he took in the Arrancar's Ryatsu, and he remembered this exact feel and the bitter taste of defeat he had gone through. The only loss he had ever suffered in his entire life. "You. Vulpes, see," he muttered, taking on a much more serious approach. Naruto grinned and raised an eyebrow in confusion at the odd title, before remembering that Soul Society assigned codenames to hollows. "Vulpes, see? Is that what Soul Society calls me these days? Well, whatever, it's not like I care about some stupid codename. I just hope you've gotten stronger than you were all those years ago, otherwise." He trailed off, placing his hand on the hilt of his Zanpakuto before drawing it slowly. The silver gleam of the cutlass shined in the sun. "I'm gonna kill ya." Before either combatant could move towards each other, another flash and a new presence made its way onto the battlefield before them. The figure that appeared placed its hand on Naruto's Zanpakuto, effectively sheathing it. "Ulquiorra?" Naruto asked quizzically. Indeed, the Quinta Espada stood next to Naruto, holding back the Primera's Zanpakuto from being drawn. "The mission is complete. We're going back. We don't Soul Society to gain any more information on us," Ulquiorra said simply, before a golden light engulfed both Arrancar. Over where the others were fighting, a golden light dropped on those Aaron cars as well. It seemed that Hitsugaya had somehow avoided being defeated by Grimmjow's last attack, as there was a multitude of ice all over the place. The Ryatsu over there also indicated that Grimmjow and Hitsugaya were engaged in a fierce battle. That is, until the negation snatched up Grimmjow and the others. Negation. Ichigo whispered. Shinji glared up at the blonde and black-haired Aaron cars, who were rising into the Garganta in the sky. He didn't even get to don his mask. It seems you've gained some kind of new power, but is this all you can achieve with it? This is the end, there is no way you can do anything now. The sun has already sunken into our grasp, Ulquiorra said cryptically, as he stared down at Ichigo from the negation. Wait, Vulpes C, were you the one who destroyed the village of Konoha 100 years ago? He shouted up to the sky. Naruto smirked, and Ulquiorra looked at his leader stoically. That is none of your concern, he hissed cheekily, as he disappeared into the Garganta completely alongside Ulquiorra. Ichigo and Rukia stood in awe of the Aaron car, and Shinji pounded his fist onto the panes of the roof. Damn it! Who was that, Ichigo? Asked Rukia, as she helped Ichigo to his feet. The boy had gotten very bloodied up during his fight with the Aaron car, so much that he seemed unable to move. I don't know, he didn't give me his name or anything. I don't even know what member of the Espada he is or even if he is a member at all. All I know is that I was no match for him. He said sadly. He was threatening to fall back into another depression. A truly mysterious Aaron car. Rukia commented. It was on all their minds. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.